Things have been happening in the shed. After finishing the workbench in the previous episode, it seemed that creating my oasis away from the troubles of everyday life was still a long way off. To clear away some of the clutter that was harshing my mellow, it seemed reasonable to introduce a few new storage options into the shed. Here are 6 storage solutions I went with to start tidying up the place. I threatened to build shelves above the workbench in my last video. Now here I am actually doing it. The offcuts from the bench tops were 200mm wide, which made it easy to decide on a shelf width. So it was just a matter of finding a couple of shelf lengths and cutting them. I just found some off-the-shelf brackets from the hammer barn, which have sort of an industrial look to them that floats my boat. The first shelf went up easily with the aid of the laser level and was 2400mm long, so it didn't need cutting at all. These conduits you see in the wall are compressed air and power. I unscrewed the brackets holding them up so they'd run through the shelf brackets and be somewhat hidden. I'll have another video that goes over the airlines and such in the future. The second and third shelves were a lot easier with the help of a clamp and the level. Once all the brackets were done, I then treated all 3 shelves to a round over on the top edge and a small chamfer along the bottom edge. After a good sanding, I brought out the walnut stain and gave them all a splash of brown. The trusty Danish oil came out next, and once both coats were dry, I could then screw them in place for the final time. Pretty nifty, even if I say so myself. Next, I always wanted a toolboard in my shed, but having never made one or really seen one I liked in real life, it took a while to come up with a layout. In the olden days, you'd just hook your tools onto a pegboard and draw around them with a marker. That idea wasn't for me, so I decided to just hang the tools straight onto the wall with some nails. I'd put up the little plastic drawer sets a while back, which helped limit the size of the toolboard to the area between them. I also picked up a nut and bolt thread checker, since those drawers are for storing nuts and bolts. So after roughly arranging the tools I wanted on the workbench, it was time to put some nails into my precious wall and hang tools on them. For my screwdrivers and chisels, I wanted some little holders to keep them together. A leftover piece of wallboard was very carefully cut into thirds, and then to some arbitrary length, rounded over, chamfered, and sanded. Then they were marked with the positions of the screwdrivers and drilled. I put on these brackets and found a place for the holders on the wall. Before committing to a position for the next holder, I made sure the screwdrivers from the holder below were able to be taken out. Also, there was one made for the chisels, but it seems I didn't film it. I cut a few little timber strips to go under the shelf to make it more usable as a toolboard. I didn't really decide what I wanted to put there until after it was made, so I just ended up with the hex and Torx keys, along with some little tubs for handy items and to throw screws into that I find on the floor. Then, once I found a spot for all the tools that I use the most, I took down all the little pieces that needed some sort of coating and coated them. And there we have a toolboard. I'm pretty happy with that, actually. I seem to have pledged allegiance to the Makita team of 18-volt tools. In my workshop layout plan, I mocked up a battery charging station by the door, Unfortunately, the batteries and chargers I have don't have a wall mounting option, so I had to design one myself. I took the measurements of the chargers first and came up with this piece that was designed to be 3D printed. After a few iterations were printed and tested for fitment, we were left with this final revision that fit the batteries needed mounts too, so I put on my designing pants again and came up with this. Again, it's 3D printed and has a built-in support structure to enable the overhang that the batteries slide into. They can easily be removed with a screwdriver. The battery mounts are designed to follow the contour of the batteries and be mounted so that the charge level can be seen at a glance. I had this timber offcut laying about that conveniently fit between the door and window architraves. I thought it would make a nice little shelf to put my beer on, and I could tuck the charger power cables up under it to keep them out of the way. I mounted it with some steel brackets and used some short screws since the cavity slider was right behind it. I tested the battery mounts for a height that I liked and spaced them apart with this spacing stick. Next came the slow charger. I just lined up the top height with the battery mounts and set the laser level with the bottom of the charger mount. I thought I'd give it all a little test while I was at it. I mounted the quick charger too, which I don't use that often but is handy in a pinch. I started doing some cable management but realized that the shelf needed painting, so I just have to take it all back off. So I prepped and painted the shelf. I wasn't sure what kind of coating it had previously, so I brought out the enamel primer that seems to stick to anything. Because the previous finish was darker, I gave the shelf a coat of wall paint too and finished it with the same gloss acrylic that I used on the architraves. Then back to cable management. I mounted the power board in line with everything else and continued to prop up the cables with the help of these little plastic clips that I had laying around. I have a Ryobi battery and charger too, specifically for this work light, so I also mounted it to the wall and I just wedged the power cable in with the rest of them. This is what I have now. Not entirely happy with the cable situation, so if you have any better solutions, please let me know. I have these steel racks I made for the ute a while back that were just in the way when I wasn't using them. The simplest solution I could come up with was to hang them on the wall. So I came home with this assortment of hardware and got to it. I wasn't sure of the best way to hang up these link bars, as I've been calling them, but ended up with this rubber coated double hook that's been working pretty well. The rear bar fit nicely into these 50mm square hooks. It was almost like they were made to fit. The last thing to do was screw on some rubber bump stops to try and prevent damage to the wall. A pretty simple solution, but quite satisfying. I came up with this hook idea while making the animation, and it made it into that video. I thought about mounting the ladders on hooks down the side of the house or the shed, but it just wasn't going to work. So this is what we have: another bracket from the hammer barn, big and strong enough to hold 3 ladders. I bent up the end of the bracket to keep them from sliding off, and I did give the paint a touch up with a spray can. Then it was a matter of finding a stud and screwing the bracket into the wall. Another very simple solution that I hadn't seen before, and is even strong enough to hold a fourth ladder. That's seen better days, but I can't bear to throw away. Another off-the-shelf option for materials storage. These king chrome racks were close enough to what I was planning and weren't that expensive either. They were pretty simple to put together, and each rung is rated for 50 kilograms, which I think is about 4,000 pounds. I found a height that was low enough to fit under the diagonal braces and high enough so I don't hit my head on them. I already had my stud positions marked on the damp course, so I went over the ones that I wanted to mount the racks on to highlight them. Then I set up a ladder with a frickin' laser beam attached to it and got mounting. I assumed I'd need to cut a slot out of the joint cover strip, but I was wrong. The racks have a standoff where they screw into the wall, which gave enough space to clear the strip. Then I did the rack at the other end of the wall, for which I needed to rig up this janky laser setup to get my height, and it helped with aligning the racks to the studs too. There we are. I still need a bit more material storage, but this is a nice start. I acquired a couple of sets of steel shelves and put them in the shed like I said I would, and now they're stacked with a bunch of stuff. I designated a corner for the cleaning gear, and while I was at it, made some little shelves for the stereo and its speakers. Because it's old, I added a Bluetooth adapter and extended the speaker cable across the top of the roller door. Ultimately, I want to be able to blow the dust out of the shed with compressed air, so these toolboxes are for little items that could blow away. Pencils, drill bits, what have you. Thanks for watching till the end, I really appreciate it. Special thanks to my main man Jacoby8455 for buying me a beer. I actually stretched it to a 6-pack with your generous donation, which I really enjoyed. If you liked the cut of my jib and would like to buy me a beer too, check out my PayPal link in the description. Also, if you're in the market for some decent camera gear, check out my affiliate link with Neewer. Here's cheers.